He maintains a diverse practice of law, civil litigation, white-collar, and regulatory compliance. He is a celebrated trial and appellate attorney with a wealth of experience winning difficult cases against long odds. Joe Kahn joined Specter, Gadden, Rosen after a distinguished career as a local and federal prosecutor in Philadelphia. He began his career at the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, where I started, and Ed Rendell started. So he got some great experience. He devoted more than 6 years prosecuting violent crime. And as an assistant district attorney, he dedicated his practice to fighting for the victims of sexual assault, child abuse, and domestic violence. And he served nearly a decade in the U.S. Attorney's Office, where he was highly respected. That was the office for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. And he was lead or sole counsel in a wide variety of cases. And his work as prosecutor has been featured prominently by the local and national media, including dedicated episodes of 2020 and True Hollywood Story. So he's a very bright person because Joe Kahn went to Swarthmore College. He went to the University of Chicago and Philadelphia Public Schools. He's lectured on legal issues throughout the country and is currently a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Pretty good. And he teaches trial advocacy. And he went to the University of Chicago, where Barack Obama was his constitutional law professor. So, Joe Kahn, rather than hearing from me, welcome to our show. When I met you with Jared Solomon a couple weeks ago, I said, I want you to come on because you're going to run for DA. The elections, you can tell us when the election is, why you're running, and why people should vote for you. Take it away, Joe Kahn.
So much for having me. It's great to be here, and it's great to talk to you again. How are you today?
Doing great. I was very impressed when I met you because you have a great background to be the district attorney. So tell us a little bit about your career, what you did in the DA's office, what you did in the U.S. Attorney's office, and why you think we need a new DA.
Thanks, Bob. And it was great to meet you, and it's always great to meet fellow alumni of the DA's office.
Right.
Going there was really just my dream as a kid. I was a 15-year-old sophomore at Central High School when I learned what a prosecutor did and what the Philadelphia DA's office was, and I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life. And it really was the privilege and honor of a lifetime. I got to come out of law school and spend just over 6 years really dedicating my entire career there to focusing on domestic violence and sexual assault of both adults and children, and all forms of child abuse, really. And it was such an honor to handle those cases because what you were doing was you were being a champion for people that had been violated in the worst possible way. And unfortunately, Bob, a lot of times folks who are targeted for sexual assault, for child abuse, are people that are chosen because their attackers feel like they can get away with it, right? They feel that no one's going to believe these victims if they come forward because maybe they have a checkered past. If it's a child, maybe that kid has a history of getting in trouble or telling stories. If it's an adult, maybe it's a woman who is a sex worker with a arrest history and a drug problem. So oftentimes I was going up against these very emboldened offenders who thought they could get away with things, and that's why they decided to do what they did. And so getting to take on those fights on behalf of those victims is really just the privilege of a lifetime. As you know from having been in the DA's office, not every case is a slam dunk. And what you learn in that office is how to keep going even when times are tough.
Correct. When you're assistant DA, you represent the community to get the bad guys off the street. Good citizens don't want to have criminals attacking them, have criminals, whether it's sexual assault or robbery or this person hopped up on drugs trying to commit crimes to get some money for the drug habit. So you had an important position.
Yeah, and you're so right, Bob. I mean, I think that one of the most important things that the district attorney has to do in Philadelphia is to keep people safe and make them feel that they're being kept safe. And Unfortunately, I think right now, our district attorney, Seth Williams, has really lost his way, and a lot of what we're seeing come out of that office is really just a focus on the image, the perception that he's doing a good job, that he's keeping people safe, because there's been a real obsession over statistics and having a win rate. And there's some real problems that come with that. There's the problem, number one, about having prosecutors more focused on winning than doing the right thing. And secondly, Bob, I think what's even perhaps more troubling for people who are potential victims of crime is that the office is really taking a pass on difficult cases, the kinds of cases that I tried when I was in the office, and saying to the police officers, saying to the detectives, and most importantly, saying to the victims, we think we might lose this case, so we're not even going to try because we don't want to lower our win record. And that kind of attitude and that kind of culture doesn't make us safer, Bob. It makes things more dangerous. It makes us more vulnerable. And you're going to lose 100% of the cases that you don't try, the cases that you don't bring into court, the cases where you don't have dedicated prosecutors fighting for victims. But that's what we have right now. And that this, I think, became most infamous the week of the Democratic National Convention, when a woman who herself was a delegate, who was an activist, reported a crime and was told, in her words, she reported that the office told her they weren't going to take a chance on trying her attacker because they thought they might lose, right? And to say something like that to a victim is really outrageous, and I think is really the kind of result you see when there is no sense of priorities in terms of what the district attorney's office needs to be doing. And what you need to do is you need to focus the energy of that office on prosecuting violent crime. And that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that the DA's office is a place that has the back of every citizen of the city, whether it's a person of color, whether it's a woman, whether it's a person who is more vulnerable to hate crimes or violent crimes. I want everyone in the city to understand that the DA is going to protect their rights and is going to keep them safe.
Right, and Joe Kahn served as an assistant DA, went on to become an assistant U.S. attorney. He's our guest today. And Joe, there seems to be, because Williams is seeking a third term as district attorney, and the primary is May 16th. The election for president, the primary is in April. That was April 26th last year. And he's been beset with controversy, including a federal investigation of his campaign spending and a revelation in August that he failed to properly disclose $160,000 in gifts in the last 5 years. So because of that, you're going to run today. Rich Negrin, who was Philadelphia's managing director, he said, and like you, he was an assistant DA. He's looking to run. I heard some former judges are thinking of running. So you're in it to stay. And who else do you think will be a candidate?
That's really up to other people. I mean, I'm the only announced candidate. I had to make a decision because I was a federal employee, because I spent my entire life in public service. If I was going to even really consider this, I was going to have to quit my job. And, I didn't have to mull anything over when I made the decision to leave the U.S. Attorney's Office. When I made that commitment, and my wife made the same commitment because she had to leave her job, she was working for Seth. We knew when we made that decision that the stakes were too high in the city to sort of have this politics as usual game of sort of skirting around things and playing the whispering campaign about whether I am going to run, I'm not going to run. So I took the time that I needed to make sure I could assemble a team, that I could have the conversations that I couldn't have when I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And then 2 weeks later, I stood in front of the District Attorney's Office and I announced my candidacy for District Attorney.
Right. And so I guess you're out there raising money and meeting with people every day. Is that right?
I am, and I've really been overwhelmed by the positive response that I've gotten. Not only to, sort of me personally, in terms of people, cheering on my vision for the city, people being moved by my background, which really touches and has so many common points with so many people in the city. Because as you know, and I think you mentioned, I really come from a very kind of diverse background. My family represents all the great religions of the world. My family represents many different nationalities and ethnicities ethnicities. I'm the son of an immigrant. Between my kids have 4 grandparents that represent, all the great religions of the world. And, having gone to public schools, having gone to Central High School, having worked as a city lifeguard, having worked as an assistant district attorney, I've been to every neighborhood in the city, right? I can go everywhere. I can talk to everyone because people understand that when I meet with them, when I talk to them, that I am sincere, that I'm authentic, and that I'm dedicated to the people of the city. And so it's been wonderful to get that response, not just in terms of what people are willing to donate, whether that's a big donor or it's somebody who is literally giving me, $10, $15, $20 that they can afford to show as their gesture of support for change in the city. And the appetite to have a district attorney's office that acts with integrity is enormous, Bob. And it's sad that we're at this place because I know when you were at the DA's office, Bob, nobody questioned the integrity of the ADAs or the district attorney. People took for granted, I think, that the district attorney...
Right. You know what I'm amazed about? When I was in the DA's office with Ed Rendell and Arlen Specter and Dick Sprague and some federal judges, Mike Bailson, etc., there were 500,000 more people in Philadelphia, 2 million people. Today, there's only about 1.5 million people. We had 66 DAs doing the job. That today, there's over 300 DAs. I don't understand that.
I got to say about it, it really doesn't make any sense when, you have, members of city council, you have the public crying out about some of the highest paid attorneys in that office who get caught red-handed in the exchange of emails that are horribly racist and misogynist and homophobic and pornographic. And they're doing that on government time with government computers. And the kind of stuff, Donald Trump calls that locker room talk. I call it completely offensive and unacceptable. And the fact that, the district attorney's office is squandering precious resources, paying top dollar to folks like that to stay on the job just doesn't make any sense to me. We can't afford to devote precious city resources to anything other than keeping the city safe. And I think that whether we're talking about money or we're talking about, the very important space that the district attorney's office holds, and specifically the DA holds, we can't afford to be distracted by all these scandals. All these questions that you're mentioning, Bob, that have been raised for months, some of these could be put to bed very easily. We're reading all these reports about the IRS and this investigation that you mentioned. And so, I called on Seth to just, look, why don't you just release your tax returns? Hillary Clinton did it. Donald Trump is hiding his. Well, why don't we follow Hillary's example and the example that every presidential candidate and many other candidates throughout this country in our democracy follow, which is to be transparent. Let's just turn over our tax returns and show we have. And, I don't want Seth to have any excuses, so I gave out my tax returns, and, they didn't really have anything exciting. They showed that my wife and I were public servants, that we sent our kids to daycare, that we gave to charity when we could. And
Joe, and I have you on today because I have a lot of respect for you and your background. I know your parents settled in the bustled neighborhood of Northeast Philadelphia, where I was the state senator, and they raised you and your brother. And your dad, as you said, immigrated. Your dad, Zia, immigrated to the United States, and he met your mom, Pat, who's a nurse from West Oak Lane. Where did your dad immigrate from?
He came in from Pakistan.
Pretty good.
He was actually, he was born in India originally, and then he spent his childhood in Pakistan after after the lines were redrawn, and he actually he studied engineering over there, but then he wanted to come and study at the best schools in. Well,
you're bright. They say Swarthmore has the best and the brightest. Talk about Swarthmore and the University of Chicago Law School. You'll be interested to know the chairman of the Board of Trustees of University of Chicago lives right here in Philadelphia, and I was at a dinner the other night where he was honored with some prominent people. Joe Neubauer, he took ARA from a small company to having hundreds of thousands of employees, and he's a great man, and he commutes to Chicago, And I know, so talk about Swarthmore, talk about Chicago Law School. I know one of my prior guests, Amy Klobuchar, wrote a book, and she went to University of Chicago Law School. And I know there you were taught by Barack Obama. So talk about that. Take it away. Talk about Swarthmore, Chicago, two of the best schools in the country.
I really hit the jackpot because, as I said, my parents, my dad worked for the city, mom was a nurse, and we went to public school our whole lives. But, for high school, my public school was Central High School, and, that was a time when, we had teachers that had the resources they needed, and we got the best education, in my opinion, in the world, because not only was it good for academics and athletics, but we also were the most diverse high school in the country, right? And you got to just meet people from all kinds of backgrounds. You learn how to get along and meet with everyone. And so when I got to Swarthmore College, which is one of the best schools in the country, and a lot of my peers that were coming from some of the top prep schools, I was extraordinarily well prepared, having come from Central. And as you know, Swarthmore has this great Quaker tradition, which has these great testimonies, and key among them is service. And that was really just a great fit for me because in addition to being very serious about intellectual debate and academics, and allowing me a chance to play sports and things like that, Swarthmore really put a great emphasis and really encouraged service, which is really how I wanted to spend my life after college. So going on from there to the University of Chicago Law School was really a treat. And, I'd never heard of Barack Obama. I don't think anyone had when I got to the law school.
Right.
But, there I was, my first week at orientation, and there was sort of a discussion about national politics, and there was this adjunct professor, skinny guy, kind of dressed like a grad student, and he was kind of talking about how, in addition to teaching and practicing a little law, he was involved in politics, and, he really impressed me. So the first chance I got...
What year did you graduate University of Chicago Law School?
That was in 2000. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So that was... before he was a candidate, 8 years before, because the world didn't get to know him till 4 years later when he ran for. Had been a state senator, I guess, when he was teaching law school.
Oh boy, I remember how proud I was just to have known him.
Right in 2004, I was in Boston when John Kerry, who was the nominee for the Democrats, allowed Barack Obama, who was the candidate for U.S. Senator, didn't know if he was going to win or lose. They allowed him to give the keynote address, and he talked about America, and it was a great speech, so he became a national figure.
Yeah, the audacity of hope. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was an incredible speech and really spoke to, the best about our country, right? It was really aspirational, and I think it was a great unifying speech that for good reason put him on the national stage. And so I remember the morning after when everyone was asking, is this the guy you were telling us about? He was the guy that I not only studied under, but had the great honor of getting to work for when he first ran for Congress. It was not successful, but I learned a lot.
Right, he ran, lost to a congressman, but then after that he got elected to the state Senate, right?
He did, yeah, and he did okay for himself. Right.
So you have to. So was he? He must have been. He went to Harvard Law School, so he must have been. He was a great speaker and a brilliant man. Did you feel that?
He did, yeah, and in addition to all those things, which are undoubtedly true, another thing what really came across was his humility and his sense of purpose and mission, and the degree to which he really stayed grounded. He had a lot of qualities that I try to emulate, and at the time that I knew him, he had a really young family. He was teaching law school. He was working part-time as a lawyer, and he was running for public office, and that's exactly where I am now. And I really always think back to the time that I sort of followed his example in terms of what kind of person you want to be, because it can be easy to lose your way, and that's
right. What subject did he teach you? Constitutional law?
Yeah, we covered a lot of that. The name of the seminar was "Race in the Law," and so it really focused on sort of the legacy of racism and how the law has served to perpetuate that or to try and transcend that, right? And so there was a lot of constitutional law in that course, looking at the Equal Protection Clause and due process, and that obviously is something that any district attorney needs to be focused on. Is are we perpetuating the problems that exist in society, or are we trying to do something about it? Are we going to be vigilant and try and make things better? And that's what I want to do for the city.
Right, and our guest is Joe Kahn. He currently resides in Roxborough with his wife Jessica and their 2 young sons. Is your wife? She's an attorney. Is she? She was a prosecutor. Is she still in the DA's office?
No, she's not. And like me, so Jessica is also a born and raised here in Philly, and she's had a great career. She started out clerking for a federal judge, and then spent some time at a law firm. And then when we started having children, it seemed like a good time for her to make that transition into government service. She had worked in public interest areas before law school. And so she worked at the DA's office then doing appeals and really loved her job. And that made it all the more difficult for her to leave, because while certainly the problems of the district attorney right now are making morale very difficult for that office, it doesn't change the fact that there are good men and women, Bob, and you know this. There are always going to be good men and women that want to work at that office, that want to just serve the city, that just want to they're never going to get paid what they're worth. You know that. But what they can get is a sense of mission and purpose. And she had that despite all of Seth's problems and scandals and distractions. And so it was really painful for her to leave a job that she loved. And the reason she did that wasn't because this was going to be an easy path for us. It wasn't because, she thought that people were going to start offering to put a roof over our house or giving me bags of cash or, giving us any kind of personal reward. It's because she believed that the city needed me to step up and run the DA's office and take on Seth. And that's why I did that.
Right, and where did she go to? Jessica go to law school?
She went to law school right here at Villanova. She also she studied at Haverford College, which also, like Swarthmore, had a Quaker tradition, and was a really
Haverford's a great school. That's where Shane Inspector went.
Yeah.
Right.
Great memory.
And Villanova's where Ed Rendell went to. Graduated same year as me, 1968. So I know there's not enough time. We'll get you on closer to the election in May.
Yeah.
But I know there's many topics for discussion, and we'll give you a couple minutes to talk about hate crimes, domestic and sexual violence, ethics and transparency, protecting the children. And I'm interested, before we go there, tell me about some of your the cases you prosecuted were featured on 2020 and True Hollywood Stories, Online Nightmares. Tell us about those cases.
Yeah, and they kind of sum up a lot of why I got into this race, Bob. So there was a man who was going around, and he was from a wealthy family, and what he really enjoyed doing was victimizing women. And he had this whole MO. We don't have time to, I think, go through all the cases, but over the years, about 30 women eventually, confided that they had been, in their view, drugged and assaulted by this man. But he got away with it for years. They were afraid to report him. They thought that he would use his money to embarrass and destroy their lives. And in fact, because what he was doing was really attacking them while they were under the influence of alcohol or something else, and they weren't really clear what had happened. They were really unsure about their experience and would kind of question themselves. So these were really difficult cases where victims actually didn't come forward. In many cases, we found them when we learned about what he was doing. And because of some of their behavior, where after they were attacked, they continued to see him and talk to him and have relationships with him, these were very difficult for a jury to understand. And so what ended up happening was I led this prosecution. I put it together with the help of both the police and the FBI.
And I congratulate you, because the FBI honored you for your work in these cases. Isn't that right?
I was really honored, to get that recognition. And I have to say, briefly, we lost on a lot of the charges that we brought forward. But if we hadn't gone forward against this man, we would have lost on 100% of the counts.
Was he from the Philadelphia area, or?
He had moved here. He'd been from all over the country. He had a lot of family out west, but most of his victims were here in Philadelphia. And while he was, I took him to trial twice, Bob. And while he was on bail when I first got the case for two rape charges, he went and drugged and raped. He went and raped another victim in Idaho.
Hopefully he's in jail. Is he in jail now?
I'm glad to say he's now serving a life sentence.
Good, because that's the people we want to protect the community from.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't say, look, these cases are tough, and we're gonna look strong by winning 100% of the cases that we do try. You got to take on the tough cases. You got to fight for the people, because people in the city need to understand that if they've been a victim of a crime, you're going to fight for them, whether they're vulnerable, whether they're particularly likely to be targeted for sexual assault or for hate crimes or anything else, Bob. We need to protect the entire city, right? Every neighborhood, every person, and that's the DA I'm going to be for the people of Philadelphia.
Right. So when you're running for DA in May, Trump will be the new president. Talk about running the DA's office in the Trump era.
Well, that's one of the things that's most concerning, Bob, because we're still a couple months away from Inauguration Day, and already what we've seen in this country is we've seen this outpouring of hatred, especially targeting people of color, people, women, people that are, whether they're Muslim or they're immigrants, who feel like they're not sure if they even have a place in this country anymore. And this is going to be a very exhausting time to be a citizen, because people of conscience are going to have to be on constant alert, and they're going to need leadership in their local government. And as district attorney, I'm going to provide that. And the space that I think do the most good at is making clear that the district attorney's office in no way is going to support any of Donald Trump's extreme anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant policies that he championed when he was running for president. And the DA will not in no way be a partner for any of those efforts. And what we are going to do, and I know how to do these cases, having prosecuted hate crimes at the district attorney's office, is we are going to be on red alert with these hate crimes. We are going to make sure that these cases get top priority, that the message goes out, that this kind of conduct will not be tolerated, just like I wouldn't tolerate those kinds of racist emails. We're not going to tolerate racist criminal behavior, and we're going to make sure that we deter that activity and that people in the city feel safe.
Right, and Joe Kahn, I want to thank you for being our guest today, because people often thank me for letting them meet the candidates in depth, because instead of just being a name on the ballot, they learn something about you. Tell us, you must have a website where people can volunteer for your campaign or learn more about you. What's your website?
It's Joe for Philly, JoeForPhilly.com. I am for Philly, and I hope people will be for me.
Joe for Philly, that's great. I wish you the best. We'll invite you back on in April, and I wish you the best. The DA, Alan Butkovich, I think does a great job. I hope there's no one that runs against him, because he's been a tremendous city controller. You don't know of anyone talking about running against him yet, do you?
No, I am focused 100% on this race,
Great.
And that's why I quit my job so I could be a full-time candidate. But, Bob, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you very much, Joe Kahn. Wish you the best, and we'll be talking to you. We'll be following you in the paper and on your website. Thank you so much.
Have a great weekend.
A bright man.